My son told me I owed him half my pension at Thanksgiving dinner, in front of his kids, like I was some debtor who'd been dodging payments for years. I sat there at Daniel's dining table with my fork halfway to my mouth, a piece of turkey getting cold, and watched my boy, my firstborn, slide a stack of papers across the table toward me. Legal papers. His wife Jennifer sat next to him with her arms crossed, that smug look on her face like she'd just won something. My daughter Karen was on the other side, nodding along, her husband Brian wearing his broker smile. They'd planned this, coordinated it, turned Thanksgiving into an ambush. If you've ever given everything to your kids only to have them itemize what you supposedly owe them, pull up that chair and settle in. This story's gonna hurt in places you didn't know you had. Daniel cleared his throat like he was about to give a presentation. Dad, we've been talking, me and Karen, and we think it's time we had an honest conversation about fairness. Fairness. That word coming out of his mouth after everything I'd sacrificed. After 35 years teaching math to kids who couldn't afford tutors, living in the same small house in Portland so I could help them with their dreams. After raising them alone for 15 years after their mama died. And if you appreciate stories about people who stand up for themselves when their own blood tries to tear them down, go ahead and subscribe to Grandpa's Diaries. I've got more truth to tell, and I'm not afraid to tell it. You had a comfortable pension all these years, Karen added like she'd rehearsed her part. And we struggled. We had to make sacrifices because you were always so focused on being modest and humble. You could have helped us more. Could have helped more. I'd given them everything but my last breath, and apparently that wasn't enough. Jennifer leaned forward, her manicured nails tapping those papers. We're not being unreasonable, George. We just think that since you're living comfortably on that teacher's pension, and we're still working so hard, it's only fair you contribute to the family. Half seems reasonable for everything we went through. Everything they went through. Like being raised by a father who loved them was some kind of hardship they needed compensation for. I set my fork down slow and careful, because my hands were shaking, and I didn't trust what they might do otherwise. Not with anger. I'd never been an angry man. But with something deeper than anger. Disappointment so heavy it felt like drowning. I looked at my grandkids at the end of the table, confused and uncomfortable, and I thought about the leather folder I'd left in my car, the one I'd brought along for a completely different reason. Turns out the universe has a sense of timing. Daniel wasn't always like this. Neither was Karen. I need you to understand that before we go further. These were good kids once. The kind who'd run to the door when I came home from school, who'd help me grade papers at the kitchen table, who'd hold my hand at their mama's funeral and promise me we'd be okay together. Clara died when Daniel was 30 and Karen was 27. They were grown, had their own lives started, but they came back for me, stayed close those first few years, called every Sunday, brought the grandkids over for dinner. I thought we'd made it through the worst thing a family could face and come out stronger. Maybe I was naive. Maybe I just wanted to believe that love could survive anything, even death. I worked as a math teacher at Jefferson High School for 35 years. Started in 1978, fresh out of college with a degree and a dream of making a difference. The pay was never great. Teachers don't get rich. And black teachers in public schools in the 70s and 80s, we had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. But it was honest work. I taught algebra to kids who'd been told they weren't smart enough for math. Watched them walk across graduation stages. Got letters years later telling me I'd changed their lives. Clara was a nurse. Between her shifts and my teaching, we made enough to buy our little house in Northeast Portland in 1980. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a backyard where the kids could play. We never had much, but we had enough. We had family dinners every night. We had savings accounts for the kids' college. We had dreams that felt possible if we just worked hard enough. When Daniel wanted to start his landscaping business in 2005, he needed $20,000 for equipment and a truck. The bank wouldn't give him a loan. His credit wasn't established yet. I took a second mortgage on the house. Didn't tell him that part, just handed him the check and said, "Make me proud, son." The business failed within 2 years. He never paid back a cent, and I never asked. That's what fathers do. Karen wanted to get her MBA in 2010. The program cost $45,000. She'd gotten into Portland State, been so excited. Her job would only reimburse 30%. I cashed out a chunk of my retirement savings early, paid the penalty, gave her what she needed. She promised she'd pay me back when she got her big promotion. That promotion came. The payback never did. But I didn't mind. I got to watch my daughter walk across that stage with her master's degree. That was payment enough, I thought. Over the years, there were other things. Down payment help when Daniel bought his first house, $15,000. Car repairs for Karen when money was tight, $3,000 here, $2,000 there. Birthday money for the grandkids that somehow always ended up covering my kids' bills. Christmas gifts, emergency funds. That time, Jennifer wanted new furniture, and Daniel was too embarrassed to ask, but I saw it in his eyes. $5,000. Every time I gave freely. Every time I told myself, that's what family does. You help each other. You don't keep score. The change started about 5 years ago, right around when Jennifer came into the picture. Daniel had been divorced from his first wife, Amy, a sweet girl who'd grown up working class like us. They'd split amicably, stayed friends for the kids. Then he met Jennifer at some corporate networking event. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, drove a Lexus, wore clothes that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. First time I met Jennifer, she looked around my house like she was touring a museum of poverty. Touched things carefully, like humble might be contagious. This is cozy, she'd said, which I'd learned was rich people code for too small and too old. Daniel had laughed nervously, made excuses about how I liked my independence, didn't want to move to a bigger place. Like my choices needed defending. Jennifer had opinions about everything, about how I should invest my pension, about how the house could sell for good money if I fixed it up, about how I was sitting on equity I should be leveraging. I'd just smile and nod because my boy seemed happy, and isn't that what mattered? But I noticed things shifting. Daniel stopped coming by as much. When he did visit, he seemed distracted, like he was calculating something in his head. Karen's change was different, but just as painful. Her husband Brian was a financial advisor, the kind who saw everything as numbers on a spreadsheet. At a family barbecue in 2019, he'd cornered me by the grill and started asking about my pension, my social security, my savings. Personal questions wrapped in fake concern. Just want to make sure you're maximizing your retirement, George. You've worked hard. You deserve to enjoy it. What he really meant was, let me see what you've got so I can figure out what we can get from it. I know that now. Didn't want to believe it then. The requests started getting bigger. Karen needed help with her daughter's private school tuition, $8,000. Daniel's roof needed replacing, $12,000. Jennifer wanted to throw a big 40th birthday party for Daniel. Could I chip in $4,000? Every time I helped, the thank yous got shorter. The visits got less frequent. It was like I was a bank they only remembered when they needed a withdrawal. Last Christmas was when I first felt truly invisible. I'd driven to Daniel's new house in Lake Oswego. They'd upgraded neighborhoods naturally, with presents for everyone. Homemade cookies, the kind Clara used to make. A hand-knitted scarf for Jennifer that took me 2 months. A book on classic cars for Daniel, because he used to love working on engines with me. Games for the grandkids. Jennifer had opened her gift, looked at the scarf for exactly 2 seconds and said, "Oh, handmade. That's sweet." Then she'd set it aside like trash. I watched Daniel open his book, saw his face fall slightly. He'd been expecting an envelope with a check, I realized. The grandkids loved their games at least. Kids that age still know how to be grateful. Their parents had forgotten. The Thanksgiving invitation came through a text message, not a phone call, not Daniel's voice saying, "Hey Dad, come have dinner with us." Just a text from Jennifer. "Thanksgiving at our place, 4 p.m. Please bring your pumpkin pie." Like I was a caterer they'd hired. I almost didn't go. Sat in my living room that morning looking at Clara's photo on the mantle, asking her what she'd want me to do. She'd always been the bridge between me and the kids, the one who could smooth over rough patches with humor and love. Without her, I was just an old man trying to hold on to a family that seemed to be slipping away like water through my fingers. But I went. Made Clara's famous pumpkin pie from scratch, the recipe she'd perfected over 30 years. Put on my good sweater, the brown one Karen had given me for Father's Day 5 years ago, back when gifts still meant something. Drove across town to Lake Oswego in my old Honda, parking on the street because their circular driveway was full of newer, shinier cars. The house was impressive, I'll give them that. Two-story colonial, professionally decorated for fall with those expensive wreaths and color-coordinated mums. Through the window, I could see the dining table set like a magazine photo. For a moment, I felt proud. My son had done well for himself, made something of his life. That's what I'd worked for, right? To give him opportunities I never had. Daniel opened the door wearing a sweater that probably cost $300. "Hey, Dad," he said, and there was something off in his voice. Nervous. Rehearsed. He took my pie without really looking at it, handed it to Jennifer, who immediately passed it to someone else like it was radioactive. Karen was already in the dining room with Brian, and they exchanged a look when I walked in. A signal. My stomach tightened. Dinner started normal enough. The food was catered. Nothing homemade except my pie, which I noticed stayed in the kitchen, not on the dessert table. We made small talk. Brian dominated the conversation with stories about his latest real estate investments. Jennifer complained about how hard it was to find good help these days. The grandkids played on their iPads, barely looking up. Nobody asked how I was doing. Nobody asked about my week, my health, my life. Then, right after the main course, Daniel cleared his throat. That's when he started talking about fairness and honest conversations. That's when Jennifer pulled out the papers. That's when Karen started her rehearsed speech about how they'd struggled, and I'd been comfortable in how I owed them. The word owed kept coming up. Like 35 years of love and sacrifice were a debt I'd somehow failed to pay. "We've calculated it," Brian said, pulling out his phone with a spreadsheet of my supposed obligations to them. "Your pension is $3,800 a month. Social Security is another $2,000. You own your house outright. Your expenses are minimal. Meanwhile, we're drowning in mortgages, tuition, the cost of maintaining our lifestyles. It's only fair you contribute half your pension, $1,900 a month, to help support the family you created." I sat there, listening to them dissect my life like I was a problem to be solved, a budget line to be optimized. Jennifer pushed the papers closer to me. "We had our attorney draft this. It's just a simple agreement that you'll contribute $1,900 monthly to a family support fund for the next 15 years, until you're 85. It's really the least you can do, George. The least I could do." I looked at my daughter, hoping to see some hesitation, some sign that she knew this was wrong. But Karen just nodded along. "Dad, you always taught us about responsibility, about taking care of family. This is you taking care of us like we took care of you when Mom died." That line hit me like a physical blow. Like they'd taken care of me. I was the parent. I was 56 years old when Clara died, not some helpless child. They'd been adults with their own lives. They'd come to the funeral, sure, stayed for a week, made some casseroles. Then they'd gone back to their lives while I learned how to sleep in an empty bed, how to cook for one, how to live with grief as my only companion. "Sign it today and we can all move forward," Brian added, clicking his pen like he was closing a business deal. "Think of it as an investment in your grandchildren's future, your legacy, my legacy. They were going to teach my grandchildren that family was a transaction, that love came with invoices and payment plans." I excused myself from the table, told them I needed to get something from my car. Daniel started to say something about not running away from hard conversations, but I was already walking toward the door. My hands were steady now, steadier than they'd been in years, because sometimes, when the worst thing happens, you find out what you're really made of. The leather folder was in my trunk right where I'd left it. I'd brought it because I was going to show the kids something good, proof that their old man had been more careful with money than they'd thought. Was going to tell them about the college funds I'd been building for the grandkids. Had the documents ready to surprise them, to show them I was still thinking about their children's futures even if they'd stopped thinking about mine. But now, walking back into that house with that folder under my arm, I had a different purpose. The dining room went quiet when I returned. Jennifer actually looked annoyed, like I was interrupting their hostile takeover with my presence. I set the folder on the table, right on top of their legal papers, opened it slowly, started pulling out documents, receipts, bank statements, canceled checks, 30 years of paper proof of what a father's love actually costs. "You want to talk about fairness?" My voice was calm, calmer than I felt. "You want to talk about what's owed? Let's talk about it. Let's put it all on the table, since apparently we're keeping score now." I pulled out the first document, a bank statement from 2005. $20,000, Daniel. For your landscaping business that folded in 18 months. You said you'd pay me back when things got stable. Things never got stable, and I never asked. But we're keeping score now. So let's count it. Daniel's face went pale. Jennifer's smug expression started to crack. I kept going. MBA tuition for Karen, 2010, $45,000. Came from my retirement fund. Paid penalties to access it early. You got your degree, got your promotion, got your career. I got a thank you card. I slid that statement across to Karen, who couldn't meet my eyes. The room was silent except for the sound of paper on wood. I pulled out more documents. Down payment on your first house, Daniel, $15,000. Car repairs, Karen, multiple times. Here's one for $3,000, another for $2,000. Emergency funds when Jennifer wanted new furniture, $5,000. Birthday money for the grandkids that somehow always covered your bills. Christmas gifts. Mortgage payments I helped with when times were tight. I spread them all out like a dealer laying down cards. Years of generosity documented in fading receipts and bank transfers. I kept records because I itemized for taxes, not because I was keeping score. Never crossed my mind to keep score, because that's not what love does. But you're business people now. You understand numbers. So let's look at the numbers. I pulled out the final document, a spreadsheet I'd made just this morning after receiving that cold text invitation. Something had told me to total it all up. Maybe Clara's voice in my head. Maybe just an old teacher's instinct for math. $347,862. That's what I've given you too over the past 25 years. Not loaned, given. Because you're my children. And that's what fathers do. Brian's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Jennifer had gone completely white. Karen looked like she might cry, but not the good kind of crying. The caught kind. Daniel just stared at those papers like they were written in a foreign language. You want $1,900 a month from me for 15 years? That's $342,000. I've already given you more than that. I did the math out loud, because I was a teacher, and old habits die hard. So here's my counteroffer. You pay me back what you owe. With interest, let's say 5% compounded annually. Shall we be fair about this? And then we can talk about who owes who. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. Even the grandkids had stopped playing on their iPads. One of them, my granddaughter Sophie, looked at her father with confusion. Dad, did Grandpa really give you all that money? Daniel couldn't answer her. Couldn't answer anyone. The papers in front of him told a truth he'd apparently forgotten, or hoped I'd never prove. I gathered my documents slowly, carefully, putting each one back in the folder. My hands weren't shaking anymore. There's a strange calm that comes when you finally stop pretending everything's okay. When you stop protecting people from the truth, even when that truth hurts. I'm 71 years old, I said, and my voice carried through that fancy dining room like I was back at Jefferson High, teaching a lesson to students who weren't paying attention. I've got maybe 15 good years left if I'm lucky, maybe less. And I've spent the last few years watching you two turn into people your mother wouldn't recognize. People I don't recognize. Jennifer tried to speak, but I held up my hand. I didn't come here for an apology. Wouldn't believe it if you gave one right now anyway. I came here because you invited me. Because despite everything, you're still my children, and I still show up. That's what family does. Real family. Not the transactional kind you're proposing. Karen finally found her voice. Dad, we didn't mean... But the words died in her throat because we all knew that wasn't true. They'd meant exactly what they said. They'd planned it, coordinated it, brought lawyers and spreadsheets to Thanksgiving dinner. You don't do that accidentally. I'm going to leave now, I said, closing the folder. I'm going to go home to my small house that I paid off with honest work. I'm going to eat leftover pie and watch football by myself. And I'm going to think real hard about what kind of relationship we have left, if any. I looked at my grandchildren, who were watching everything with wide, confused eyes. You kids take care of yourselves. Remember that Grandpa loves you, even when your parents forget what love actually looks like. Daniel stood up then, and for just a second, I saw my boy again. The one who used to help me rake leaves. The one who'd held my hand at his mother's funeral. Dad, please. We can talk about this, we didn't mean to, but I was already walking toward the door. Some conversations can't be walked back from. Some words, once said, change everything forever. I drove home through Portland streets lit up with holiday decorations. Families through windows, laughing and loving each other without conditions or calculations. My phone started ringing before I even got to the highway. Daniel, then Karen, then Daniel again. I let them ring. They could leave voicemails, could send texts, could say whatever they needed to say. But I was done being an ATM that occasionally got invited to dinner. I was done being convenient. I was done accepting crumbs when I'd given them the whole damn feast. Here's what I learned that day. You can sacrifice everything for your children and still end up being the villain in their story. You can love them unconditionally and still have them put conditions on loving you back. And sometimes the hardest part of being a parent isn't letting them go. It's accepting who they've become when they've gone. But here's the other thing I learned. Your worth isn't determined by how others value you. Your dignity can't be stolen unless you hand it over. And sometimes, walking away is the most loving thing you can do, because staying would mean accepting less than you deserve. If this story hit you somewhere deep, if you've ever been taken for granted by the people who should treasure you most, leave me a comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me I'm not alone in this. And subscribe to Grandpa's Diaries because I've got more truth to tell. Some stories end with reconciliation and hugs and lessons learned. This one's still being written. My kids have my number. They know where I live. The ball's in their court now. And me? I'm finally learning that being a good father doesn't mean being an endless well they can drain dry. It means teaching them, even now, even this late, what real love actually costs and what it's worth.